because I want to go through for you some of the expectations or some of the ways you can start planning your life as a professional. Okay? So this is thinking about professional school, this is thinking about graduate school, this is thinking to a lesser extent about jobs after college, but primarily people interested in graduate school, professional school, and how to be getting ready for that. Okay? Now you'll notice I'm sitting on the table and I have no PowerPoint behind me, and that's the way I like to do these sessions. Okay? The more audio-visual doodads I show you, the less meaning I think the words actually have. So I'm here to give you some guidance for that. And many of you will have heard some of this before. I would say that all of you have not heard all of this before. Okay? So there should be something new for everyone that's there. Okay. Now, let me just get a showing of hands to get started. How many of you are pre-health, meaning you want to go to medical school, dental school, pharmacy school, optometry school, something like that? Maybe easier if I say how many of you are not pre-health? Okay. Those of you who are not pre-health, how many of you are not planning to go to graduate school? 1? Okay. 2? Okay. And that's fine. So this, and I will have at least a couple things relevant to getting jobs after college as well, so it will be relevant for you hopefully as well. But most of what I'll say will have to do with getting ready for professional schools. Okay? Okay. So getting ready for professional school, and I'm using that term in a very broad sense here. I would include graduate school and professional school as well, even though a graduate program is really a somewhat different path than a professional school is. Okay, the preparation that you're doing for these is actually similar in in general terms. All right, so when you think about success of getting into professional schools, you have to think about what is it that professional schools are looking for. What is it that they want you to bring to the table with that? And one of the things that students always focus on, and it's true, it's part of the equation, is grades. Okay? So nobody's going to jump up and down and take you into any professional program if your grades aren't good. All right? If your grades are low, and I'll define low for you in a minute, if your grades are low, it's going to be harder for you to be successful in getting into programs that you want to get into. That's kind of a duh. But the but is that grades are not the only thing, and in fact, in some cases, they're not even the main thing that they look at. Okay? Now, I tell you that because I know many of you are grade fiends. You're obsessed. I've got to get a 4-point. I've got to do this. Oh my God, I'm making an A-, and should I drop my class? Okay? This is one question I get from freshmen every year. Okay? I'm making an A- or I'm making a B in my class, and I can't have that on my transcript. Should I drop the class? All right? Dropping the class is an option for students up to the 7th week of the term. So students will get to that point and say, oh my God, I'm just making a B, and there's no way I can do this. All right? Well, if you ask me that question, I will warn you in advance, I'm probably going to tell you you're nuts. Okay? So I will not approve of you dropping a class for a B. It's a dumb thing to do. Because dropping a class with a W on your transcript looks like, well, you're probably flunking the class. Not a good message you want to communicate, right? The other option you have at the 7th week is you can take a class as pass, no pass. Okay? It's not pass, no pass. This is a pass, no pass. It's called SU. That is satisfactory, unsatisfactory grading. You can change your grading as late as the 7th week. And I'll put some notices out about both of these things. All right? And so students will say, well, I'm not doing very well, so I'll take it SU because it won't affect my grade point. All right? Also, not a good idea. The message is if you get an S, well, I was making a C. Okay? So the #1 piece of advice is do well in your classes. If you're not doing as well as you would expect, obviously you always want to talk to me. But if you're not doing as well as you expect, then dig in and welcome to college, because that's why we have grades. All right? Obsessing about grades is one of the, I think, least productive things that you can do in college. It's a waste of your energy. Okay? It's a waste of your time. If you want to obsess about something, and I know you're not going to like what I'm going to tell you, if you want to obsess about something, obsess about how much you learn. That's what you want to obsess about. Am I learning as much as I need to learn. All right? If you obsess about learning, grades will eventually follow. Grades are not perfect measures of your performance, and everybody knows that. Okay? Oh my God, I'm going to have a 3.95 GPA. Okay? Great. Think about the student that's got a 2.95 GPA. All right? You're in good shape. You're in very, very good shape with that. So do not obsess with your grades. And I know those are words that will fall on your ears and probably won't sink in. I'm not saying, well, Kevin said we can go out and do bad now. Okay? That's not what I said. I said obsess with learning, and I said give it your best shot. And if you're having any issues with grades of any sort, then please do come and see me, because I can help you. We have tutors available. We have free tutors available. We have all kinds of opportunities for students to get help that they need. Okay? So I want you to take advantage of those. All right. So grades are one measure. There are actually 3 things that I tell students that get you into professional programs. Okay? 3 things. The first is what I call performance. All right? Performance is a measure of how well you do and how much you know. Well, grades are part of that, but they're not the only thing. If you want to go into a professional program of any sort, you're going to have to take an exam that demonstrates your knowledge. All right? If you're going to medical school, you have to take the Mcat. There's no exception. If you want to go to pharmacy school, you take the Pcat. All right? And there are some exceptions to that, but nonetheless, you should just prepare yourself for it. If you want to go to optometry school, you go to the OT. If you want to go to dental school, you take the DAT. If you want to go to graduate school, you take the GRE. All right? And the reason that every program has those standardized exams that you take is to see how do your grades compare with somebody else's grades. Because they have no way of comparing GPAs, which is one of the reasons I say obsessing with GPAs is ridiculous. They have no way of comparing your GPA of a 3.9 in biochemistry at Oregon State with a 3.6 from biology at Harvard. How do you compare those two? Does anybody have any good formulas? There are none. But a very simple way to do it is to give everybody the same exam and say, well, look, this person made a 38 on this Mcat exam. 38 is a great score on the Mcat, by the way. Okay? And this student made a 30. All right? And irrespective of what the grade points are, they're going to look at that 38 very differently than they're going to look at that 30. Well, this should tell you why obsessing with learning is going to make a difference for you. All right? The more you learn, the better you perform on that, the more likely you're going to do well on that entrance exam that's going to be needed for any program that you want to go into. Okay? Biochemistry is a very rigorous program. One of the things that biochemistry does very well is we give you very solid training in math, chemistry, physics, and biochemistry that are factors in every one of these exams. I told all of you when I met you that one of the things that you'll do is you'll take the hardest versions of all of those. And while that may not be the best thing for each of you, I'll be honest with you, biochem is not a perfect major for everybody. Okay? What it will do for you is if you apply yourself and you learn in those hard classes, you will do superbly. That's why our track record for students getting into professional schools is phenomenal. Everybody would like to have the track record we have of getting our students into programs. Okay? Now, as I've told all of you before also, the major doesn't get you into a program. It's your performance that does that. So if you're struggling in the major, that's not going to work. You've got to find a thing that's going to work for you. So don't kid yourself. And I always have 1 or 2 students every year who decide to kid themselves all the way through all 4 years, and they get out with a low GPA, and they think, well, I got a biochem degree. And the way that anybody looks at those and says, well, you've got a biochem degree, but your GPA is such and such, and there's where GPA really matters when your GPA is low. Didn't you have enough sense to get out of it and do something else? Okay? So it's important for me as your advisor to assess your performance, and it's important for you to assess your performance and decide if things are going to work for you. If they're working for you, great. If not, there's other ways to go to medical school or dental school or graduate school and so forth. All right? So keep those things in mind. All right. So the performance measure is a very, very important measure of your ability. The reason that schools spend so much time on that is they want to know that you're not going to flunk out of their program. It varies from program to program. But if you look at medical schools, for example, medical schools look at the fact that they have limited number of slots available, and though you're paying a heck of a lot of money to go there, they look at this loss, if you flunk out, as a loss of an investment, both in terms of the loans that you've taken out to do things, and in terms of the fact they could have somebody else in that slot that would be going forward and finishing the program. They want to make sure that you are, in fact, academically able to go forward. Okay? Very, very important thing. So the combination of the grades and the Mcat really, or Mcat or any of these exams, I'm picking on Mcat, any of these exams are factors of success. Okay? Now different programs have different ways that they weigh those. I'll be honest with you. Okay? Medical schools tend to weigh very heavily on the Mcat. Okay? Dental schools weigh fairly heavily on the DAT, but there's a little room for slippage there. Okay? Pharmacy schools will, especially if you're applying to pharmacy school at OSU, take into consideration what your degree is if you're from OSU, because they know what the different majors do and so forth, so they have a little bit of other factors they look at. Okay? Other programs differently. GRE, interestingly enough, relies most heavily not on grades unless you're talking about a top-notch school. So if you're talking about Stanford, Harvard, okay, and you want to go to graduate school at one of those two places, then you're going to have to hit it solid on all accounts. All right? But if you're talking about going to Washington State University and you want to go to graduate school up there, what's going to weigh more heavily than grades is going to be your research experience. Okay? All right. So remember the performance component. The second component of success of getting into programs is what I call the diversity of knowledge. All right? Now, diversity of knowledge, when we think about it, means not just how well we can add and subtract, not how well we understand our chemistry, not how well we understand our physics, and even not how well we understand our biochemistry and biophysics, but how well we know the world around us. Okay? You have the opportunity at this point in your life to become what we describe as a scholar. And a scholar is a person that is not one-dimensional, but is multidimensional. A scholar knows not only what's happening in the areas of science that students are interested in, but a scholar is also knowledgeable in the world, political science. They're knowledgeable in what's happening in the arts. They're knowledgeable what's happening with economics. They're knowledgeable about what's happening in a wide variety of areas. And it turns out that of the three things I'm going to tell you, this one is the one that is the easiest of the three to get. The easiest, okay? You listen to your advisor. When your advisor says, you got plenty of science classes, let's get some humanities, let's get some liberal arts, let's get some psychology, let's get some ethics, let's get some other things in here. The reason people are doing that is not to be mean to you, but they're doing that to broaden your education and make you a scholar that is going to be a person who is a good citizen of the world. Okay? All of these programs that I'm talking about, professional programs, are aimed at making you a professional, and a professional is, very importantly, a citizen of the world. Okay? There's no way in today's world that you can be one-dimensional and be successful. Okay? If you think you can do that, then you're going to kid yourself and you're going to find some very, very big disappointments. All right? The world is changing very, very rapidly. It's very important to understand that to be able to adapt to conditions that are going to be happening in a world that's changing very rapidly under your feet, you need to be able to adapt to those. Okay? So, stay on top of those. Make sure that you're getting diversity in those. And this is one of the reasons we want you to have a very broad experience in college. It's one of the reasons I recommend living in the dorm. It's one of the reasons I recommend getting involved in organizations on campus, because, again, you're collectively broadening your knowledge by the interactions that you have. It's one of the reasons I want you to get involved in undergraduate research, because you get involved in research and what you learn in that research lab isn't going to be taught in a class. It's not going to be taught in a blackboard setting. It's going to be something that you're going to learn face-to-face with a professor. And that learning is going to help you immensely in going forward. So these are all very important factors in this idea of breadth of knowledge. Okay? All right. Now, The third factor that I want to talk about is one that is critical for any of these areas. All right. The third factor is, and by the way, you can have two of these things down great, and if you trip up on one of the three factors, your chances of going on to that next thing are just going to do this. Okay? You're going to be two-dimensional instead of being three-dimensional. Okay? So it's important to get out and get all these things together. All right. So the third factor of success of getting into these programs is your diversity of experience. Now, diversity of experience, and again, you notice I'm saying diversity, means I want you to have a lot of different kinds of experiences, experiences that you can document, and experiences that you can articulate. Right? Well, what does it mean to document an experience? Okay? Well, for those of you that want to go to medical school, working one-on-one with a physician is absolutely critical, and it's documented by a letter of reference a physician will write for you. Okay? I actually I met with some of you when you were in high school, and I frequently meet with high school students, and my number one piece of advice to those high school students is get your butt out there, all right, if you want to go to medical school, and start shadowing a doctor now. Those of you who are sitting here who want to go to medical school or to dental school, who have not shadowed a doctor, need to get off your butts and do it. Okay? Because your competition is doing it. We start thinking about, oh, I can do this, I can do that. Okay, you can, all right, but you've got to realize that there are on this campus over 700 students that want to go to medical school. That's just this campus. Multiply this by how many campuses there are in the country, and you start thinking, oh my God, right? You want to position yourself so that you're in a good place to do stuff. Now, we have a great track record of getting students into schools. And one of the reasons we do is because students hear this message I'm giving to you, and they follow it. If you follow the things that I give you, you're going to be in very good shape to go to programs. And if you don't, then you're not. It's as simple as that. Now, okay, you're talking about medical school. What about dental school? What about pharmacy school? What about graduate school? Et cetera, et cetera. Okay? They're different, but they each expect different kinds of experiences for you to have. All right? So, dental school, of course, expects you to work with a dentist. A pharmacist will expect you to have experience working inside of a pharmacy. An optometry school will expect you to work with an optometrist. Some of these all kind of duh. And graduate school will expect you to have a fair amount of research under your belt. Now, you might be sitting here thinking, well, why do you recommend research for everybody if graduate school is the primary one that wants the research experience? Anybody have an answer for that question? Okay, broadens you. Not going to hurt, but there's time is limiting. So, diversity of experience and diversity of knowledge. Exactly. Okay. Remember, I said diversity. All right. If you're applying to a dental school, medical school, pharmacy school, optometry school, physical therapy school, you name one of those schools, okay, and it looks like the only thing that you've ever checked out was the field that you're trying to go into, okay, you just labeled yourself as somebody who's not only one-dimensional, you're half-dimensional, okay? You want to have experience doing research. You want to check out other fields. You want to have a lot of different experiences so that when you tell them, I know this is what I want to do, it has some meaning. Because if you tell people, I know what I want to do, and they look and the only thing you have is experience in the field you want to work in, you really don't know what you want to do. You might think you know what you want to do, and you might jump up and down very loudly and say, yes, I know what I want to do, but you're not going to convince anybody. Okay? It's important that you convince them with the actions that you take. Okay? Very, very important to do. Now, diversity of experience is more than practical experience like working with a doctor, like working in a research lab, like working with a dentist. Okay? It's more than that. All right? It also involves evidence of social interaction. All right? Now, I always talk about the stereotypes we have of scientists, right? The stereotypes we have of scientists is they can't relate, they can't talk, they forget things, okay? They're not social. Well, in fact, scientists, or many, many scientists who are not at all in that way, all right? But because that stereotype exists, it's essential for you as a young scientist to demonstrate that you have the ability to interact with people at every level, all right? Well, how do you do that? Well, remember I said documentation, right? So, I like to see you involved in your dorm. I like to see you involved in the BB club. I like to see you involved as leaders, all right? Underline that, all right? Leaders is the best documentation you will have for social interaction. Why? Well, you can say I'm out there. You can say I'm a leader, but again, it's kind of like saying I'm really knowing what I want to do when I haven't done anything that anybody can see, right? If you're a leader, then somebody's elected you to an office. Run for an office, okay? Underline that too. Run for an office, because when you get elected to an office, what it says is somebody else saw you as a leader, and that's documentation, okay? I brag that biochem has one of the highest percentages of presidents, okay, of campus organizations on the campus. Year before last, we had 9 students in our major presidents of campus organizations. Why? Because those students got that message that leadership demonstrates an ability to relate to people and to interact with people, and in the process of being a leader, these students learned a tremendous amount about what human interaction is all about. You're not going to be a professor. You're not going to be a researcher. You're not going to be a doctor. You're not going to be a dentist without having a very, very good ability to relate to people. Okay? Now, I know people come to the university and they're very different abilities to communicate, and they have very different abilities to interact. Okay? I always tell the story, and it's a true story, that when I was your age, I was very shy. Very, very shy person. Okay? I got over it, and I got over it because I knew the importance of being able to interact with people. And so you use your experiences at college as a way of teaching you and helping you to move forward and gain that confidence that's necessary to be a very important interactor with your peers. Because if you can't relate to your peers and you can't show evidence of social interaction, then what's going to happen in that interview that you're going to have for your professional school is it's going to be very, very clear that you cannot connect with others. And every one of those fields is essential that you can connect with others. Okay? So it's important that you remember that and that you be able to document that. If you can't do that, you're going to be in trouble. Now, the good news is you're freshmen. You got 4 years to work on this. And if you're shy and you have difficulty relating to people, there's a very simple solution. It's a painful solution, but it's a simple solution. You make yourself do things you don't want to do. Okay? You make yourself do things you don't want to do. One of the reasons that we're shy is because we allow ourselves to withdraw. We allow ourselves to stay away, all right? And our inclination is to do that. And we reinforce that inclination, and our parents can help reinforce that inclination as you're going forward. But if you want to gain that social confidence and that social ability, the way to make the difference with it is to make yourself get out of that. You can do it. If I can do it, you can do it. You guys are more talented than I am. And I'm not exaggerating when I say I'm so impressed with my students' abilities at their age, because your abilities at your age are better than mine were at the same time. Okay? You guys do great things, and you will do great things. And the way that this happens, just like everything else that I've told you happens because you make it happen. Okay? Very, very important thing. I like to talk about driving the car of your life. All right? And this gets a little philosophical, I recognize. But what you recognize is when you get your driver's license for the first time, you look forward to getting your driver's license for ever since the time you're about 10 until the time you actually get your driver's license. Because what does the driver's license give you? Freedom. You can go anywhere you want, any damn time you want to, right? All right? Freedom is wonderful, okay? And you can go out and you can go see things and you can go to places that you don't have to drag your parents along and blah, 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 right? Freedom is wonderful, all right? Education is like a driver's license. Education is giving you that opportunity to go wherever you want to go with your life and do whatever you want to do with it. But it's not going to do you any good unless you learn and you drive responsibly with your education. Okay? You can take that education and go be anything that you want to be. All right? Just like you can take that car and go any place you want to go. But if you drive that car irresponsibly, you're going to lose your license, right? So learning that the ability that the education gives you to be successful and to move forward is a very, very important thing. And that's why when, if I will hammer you on the head about one thing, it's that I want you to make it happen. People say, I want to make a difference in the world. Well, those are great words, okay? And it's a great sentiment, all right? But nobody makes a difference in the world by saying those words, all right? Nobody does that. The only way in which people make a difference in the world is by getting off their butts and getting out there and making it happen. Okay, so that's my message for you. Those are my thoughts for professional school. If there's one thing that you should take from this message today, it's that you need to get out and start making things happen with respect to taking advantage of practical opportunities, shadowing, researching, etc., and not letting up on that. Okay? The more evidence you can show of those things, the better off you're going to be. Okay, now we've got a few minutes. I have an exercise I'd like to do, and I would need a volunteer to do that. How about back here? All right, a volunteer. Okay. So I teach a class on interview skills. Okay. I didn't tell you what you were volunteering for, so you didn't even know what you're volunteering for. But he got out there, and this is great, right? You didn't know what you volunteered for. So I teach a class in the Honors College on interview skills. It's called Scientists in the Public Eye. It's offered in the, actually this year it's offered in the winter term. You're probably a little young to take it, so I probably wouldn't recommend that you take it at this point. But at some point you might be interested in this because I teach you how to have a successful interview for any of these programs that we're talking about, or getting a job as well. Okay? So it's important to understand some of these things that I'm going to describe to you in terms of basic interview knowledge. Okay? One of the things that's going to happen to you at some point in your life is that every one of you is going to have an interview. That interview may be for a job. That interview may be for a professional program. That interview might be for just working in a laboratory. There's certain things that everybody should know about doing an interview that will lead you to success. Okay? And I will tell you I've had wonderful results with what I'm just going to show you here in just a couple of minutes. Okay? So I'll tell you a brief story. I had a young woman who came and saw me, and she had heard of my interview class, and she wanted to get a position up at OHSU working over the summer. And I said, okay. So I gave her the pep talk I've given you about making things happen and so forth. And so she was very gung-ho, and she wanted to go, and she wanted to talk to a professor. But she says, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do, which is a very common thing. I said, okay, that's part of why I'm here to help you. And I'm always here to help you guys all do this, okay? And so I said, okay, so we're going to go through some of these things, and maybe I'll just do them here before I tell you what they are. And I'll set you up for this, and then I'll tell you how she did this and what the result of her thing was. So the number one thing you want to think about when you're working with a person who has authority over you, meaning that they've already got a position, they're interviewing you for a position, is that that person has gone through a lot of different things than what you have to get to that point. But they also had to start where you're starting at that same point. You understand?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is an interesting dynamic for them. All right? But more importantly, it's a very important way for you to set the stage. Okay? When you go to an interview, the mistake students make is that they go in thinking that I'm down here and the person that's interviewing me is up here. Okay? That's a mistake that they make. Now, realistically, those things are true. But when you put this difference into your head, what you end up acting like is a little bitty student down here, you know, go ahead, don't hit me too hard in the head, right? If you think about this, is this the way you want that person to see you? Do you want to see the person to see you as somebody that you could club on the head, all right? You don't, all right? And that person doesn't want to see it either. That's a very important thing. The person doesn't want to see it either. You need to go to any interview that you have with confidence. And you might be scared inside, but what matters is how you look outside. What matters in any interview is the impression you make, not the actual way that you feel. Right? Okay. So I'm sitting here, and let's just imagine that we'll have the situation that I have with a student. Okay? She wants to go and she wants to get a position with a professor up at OHSU. The professor has never heard of her, doesn't know who she is or anything, and she does the following. I said, okay, so why don't you just come up and you want to talk to me, okay?
Hello, my name is Dimitri. I'm very interested in your research, and I would like to talk to you right now.
Okay, So what does he do here? He introduced himself, right? What else does he do? Okay, so he says his name. He sticks his hand out first. Have I talked to you about this before?
I went to your...
Okay, that's fine, that's fine. Okay, so he sticks his hand out first, all right? Now, what he's doing in doing this is he's taking charge of this circumstance. He's not waiting for the person out here to do it, right? And giving the person there the moment to be in charge. He comes up and he says, I'm Dimitri, and I'm interested in your research, and I want to talk to you. Very good. He gives me a firm handshake, too. Okay? That firm handshake says, I'm not afraid of you. Most young people give very limp handshakes. One of the stupidest things you can do is give a limp handshake. You don't need to crush anybody's hand. That's a dumb thing, too. But my advice is the strength of your handshake should match what that person gives you. Okay? The strength should match what they give you. He says he's interested in talking to me, and he would like to meet with me. Okay? All right? So I say, all right, how did you learn about me?
Oh.
That's okay. It's about quiz. Okay. So all right. So what I've just shown him is that you need to go in prepared, right? And you would if you had the situation. So when you go and you want to talk to somebody, you want to know everything that you can about them. Well, the web is a wonderful resource for that. Okay? The web is a wonderful resource. You learn what that person is researching, maybe the kinds of things that person is interested in, how long that person's been doing what they're doing, something to make chit-chat conversation. And so you could say to the answer to this question, well, as a matter of fact, I looked at your work online, and I'm very interested in your work in cutting up mice and regenerating tails or something like this, right? Okay? All right? Because mice don't have enough tails or something. I don't know. Okay? All right. Now, if I'm the person who's interviewing him, my first impression is, well, okay, confident young man. He knows what I'm interested in doing, okay? And he says this. Now, are you a pre-med by any chance?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the mistakes students make is that they walk in to an interview, okay, with a professor doing something, and the first thing they say is, I'm a pre-med and I want to do this. Okay? Get that language out of your head. Okay? Get the language out of your head, especially if you're going to OHSU. And people, that's backwards. People think, but they're a medical school, right? Or you can go up there and say, I'm a pre-dental, and you got the same problem, okay? It's one of the dumbest things that you can tell a professor. Does anybody know why that is?
Because it gives them the impression that you think you're more special than others.
Not quite. Not quite either. They think you're using them. The reason that you want to come here is you see this as a way of getting in to medical school. Okay? So if you walk in, this is what I told the young woman. I said, if you walk in and you tell this guy, I'm a pre-med, okay, and I want to work with you, okay, he's going to laugh you out of the room. Because he knows the reason that you're there. The reason that you're there is you think it's going to give you a leg up to get into medical school, and you don't give a damn about what my work is, no matter what you say about it. All right? So when you go to an interview like that, okay, you talk about, if you talk about your interest in research, then you should have a good reason why the research is important to you. You're still a pre-med. And if they ask you if you're a pre-med, you say, yes, I am. But going in and broadcasting this is not good. One of the principles I have of interviews is that honesty is always the best policy. You cannot lie if someone asks you something, okay? But how you frame things leaves impressions, right? So there's a very different impression if I walk in and say, I'm a pre-med, I want to do this, compared to I, am interested in your work and I want to do this, right? Haven't lied. I've left a very different kind of impression. Well, the story was, I told this to this young woman. And so we went through the handshake, and I'll give you a couple other things in a second. Went through the whole business of this. And she went up and she found a professor that she was interested in, and she went up and she did the whole thing with him. And coincidentally, this professor is at OSU the following week. And he comes by my office, and he's somebody I know. I didn't even know she was going to talk to him. And he comes by my office, and he says, hey, do you know so-and-so? And I said, oh, yeah. I said, she's a really good kid. Why? He said, he said, she came to my office. He said, and I was so impressed with her. Okay? He said, she just marched right in. She reached out, she grabbed my hand, and she shook my hand and said, I'm interested in your research. And of course, she hadn't said anything about pre-med, which is what turns people off. And he said, I gave her a position right on the spot. Okay? Now, these sorts of things where you take charge are very important. Now, you don't want to come across as cocky, and you don't want to come across as, I'm going to do this, bulldoze everybody over in the process of doing it. But you still want to convey that message that I'm a confident person, and I'm really happy to talk to you. You do that, you're in great shape. Okay? You can sit down. Okay. All right. Now, a couple other things general things about interviewing. If you take my class, you'll probably hear this repeated as well. All right? So, for an interview, you dress up reasonably well. Most people make the mistake they overdress. Okay? You always dress to respect the occasion. If you're applying for a position as a student in a lab on campus, okay, the way you're dressed right now is perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. Okay? In fact, you may be dressed better than your professor is. Okay? If you're applying for a professional school and you have an interview, then you want to dress up more. Okay? But again, it's not the more you put into your appearance, the more it seems like your appearance is what matters and not the other things. So again, you dress to respect the occasion, but you don't overdress in doing this. Okay. Now, when Dimitri comes up and talks to me, Dimitri looks me right in the eye and says, I want to do this, right? Eye contact. Very, very important. Okay? You guys know this, right? Everybody knows eye contact's important. Right? There's several reasons why it's important that you probably never thought about. Okay? Should I tell you that? Okay, I'll tell you briefly. All right. I was going to tell you a couple other things, but I'll tell you a brief story about eye contact. Okay? You go to an interview, and let's imagine you've got a panel of people who are interviewing you, right? And this panel of people that's interviewing you is sitting here. They've been hearing 20 people coming in all day long, all right? Maybe it's medical school, again, dental school, you name it, all right? You're number 19, and they got one more to go. How do they feel? They're tired, they're bored, and everybody sounds alike. One of the principles of interviewing is you need to think of things that are uniquely you and work very hard on not sounding like everybody else. That's what most people do, okay? They sound like everybody else. So you're working on this, but now it's still late in the day, and they are tired, and there's one person asks you a question, and there's 3 people sitting there, and 2 of them are doodling. Okay? Well, why are they doodling? They're doodling partly because they're bored. They're doodling partly because you haven't kept them in the conversation. You keep people in the conversation with your eye contact. You'll notice when I talk to you, I look around the room and I try to make eye contact with every single one of you as much as I can, because I know I can keep you in the conversation that way. Do you know why? Because I'm looking at you. True story. All right? There's nobody sitting here texting. There's nobody sitting here playing with their phone because they know I'm looking at them. And you know and you feel that connection to me because I'm looking at you in the eye. It's a very important thing. You do this with the interviewer. Well, the interviewer's had a long day. They're tired. They're bored. They're sitting there, and they're going to doodle. Well, when they're doodling, they're not hearing your story. I don't care how able they are to multitask. They're not getting as much of you as they would be if they were sitting here watching you. I'm going to give you a real good secret here. Do you know how you get them back in the conversation? Stop talking. Stop talking. When you stop talking, all eyes come back to you, and then you're set. Okay? And if I give you this in class, okay, I've done this in class before. Okay. So the stop talking really works. And what happens is they look at you, and then you've made that eye contact, and you just keep on going. You don't make any production of it. You don't do anything else, but you make that eye contact and go. Okay. 2 other principles of interviewing, and then I'll stop and we'll be done for the day. Okay? 1 principle of interviewing. Okay? Your smile is your best friend. Smile is the best friend. What happens when people get anxious or nervous or tense is they lose the smile. They get very serious, and they get very serious looking. And the last message you want to have to that interviewer is, I'm very serious. Because why? Well, it says that I am not a people person. It's important to be serious. It's important not to be goofy. But that's a very different thing from looking friendly. You should always look friendly. And the smile is why the smile is your best friend. So what you need to do before you have any kind of interview is you have to practice putting that smile on your face even when you're feeling anxious. Because you will forget. And when you forget, the message is not a good one. Okay? Make sure you do that. All right? The other thing that when you sit down, okay, And they'll usually have a nice comfy chair for you to sit in, because you never use the back of your chair. Make sure you sit up straight. And the last one is your hands never touch each other. I see some frowns on that one. Okay? Your hands never touch each other? Right. When you're nervous, what do your hands do? I got to go to the bathroom. Right? Is this a very good message to show somebody? Heavens no. All right? Even if you're sitting at a table. All right? The problem is when your hands are holding on to each other because they're nervous and anxious, they're not talking. You have to be a communicator. All right? If you let your hands go free, they will talk for you. Excuse me. And talking for you says that I can communicate with people. Okay? Now, that's a quick and dirty. But with that said, I've run out of time. I will let you guys be. Next week, we will talk more about undergraduate research opportunities and getting you involved in that. See you then. If you have not scheduled an appointment with me,